Let's take a look at some information and charts on Stellar for Brave New Coin. Stellar on its surface looks a lot like Ripple because Jed McCaleb had his hand in both, being the co-founder of both. Initially, Ripple had a bit of a falling out with that team and since moved on to Stellar many years ago. One other key thing Stellar did that Ripple has not is they've burned 50% of their total supply down from 100 billion to 50 billion, with half of that non-circulating, controlled by the SDF, Stellar Development Foundation. So not as perfect as maybe some of these other projects or early coins where the dev team is completely not in control of the circulating supply, but certainly better in some degrees to Ripple. And Stellar really is closer to DLT type technology. It's not necessarily someone's first pick for a decentralized cryptocurrency. Where Ripple seems to be towards the banking, interbanking stuff, Stellar seems to be more towards the individual. That's just my own feel for the situation, but both can do the same thing essentially. Both have DEXs, both have Forex payment capabilities, both have mobile wallets, all sorts of stuff that we've grown accustomed to as crypto users. So available on several wallets. Lobster is their wallet, or one of their known wallets anyway. They have DEXs, like I said, StellarX. They have market making bots. They have a bunch of stuff that I don't hear too much about, just not in my circles anyway, but all this stuff is definitely available. They have a MetaMask equivalent called Freighter, which is a Chrome plugin. Again, I don't hear anybody talking about Freighter on any given day. Here's the Kelp thing with the market making bot. So they have all the tools. Whether or not people are using them, I'm not so sure. It doesn't seem as though the ETH people and the NFT people are necessarily using Stellar for anything in particular. That isn't to say the chain isn't being used, because if we look at the on-chain stats in a second, it clearly is being used. This is like the heartbeat of Stellar. And what I love most about this specific website is the incident reports that they've had. It's just completely transparent. You know, there's been outages. There's been plenty of issues where the SDF has had to step in and sort of right the ship. And that's fine, but to most people, that isn't necessarily a high degree of decentralization. They might get there one day, but it's good that they at least have these here and not on the 10th page of some blog post deep on their website. Here's where they break down the Lumen supply is what they call it. Previously it was STR, now it's XLM. Polo still calls it STR for Stellar. Here's the non-circulating supply, greater than the circulating supply, so that's always scary. And they do drip this out. I don't know to what degree. You'd have to calculate manually what this inflation is over time. But users appear to be increasing, at least individual wallets. Circulating supply increasing as well. It looks like 200 to 400 million every couple months based on what this is showing. And again, I don't know the metrics exactly as to why they release what they release. It's not as clear as Ripple, where they take 3 million out every month and say, hey, does anyone want to buy this? No? Okay, we're going to take it back. I don't know how it works. Always interesting to look at the rich list of these chains to see where all this supply sits. Here's the burn account. You can see it's lots of Stellar just sitting there, ideally gone forever. And we can look at all the SDF wallets here, as well as Binance Cold Storage, number 13 here. 743 million XLM. Binance, again, it's probably their hot wallet. Bittrex up here, Kraken here. Just always interesting to see where all the coins sit. And not too long ago, Stellar was proof of stake. Not the case anymore. So again, I don't know what their inflation metric is currently. We can also look at all the nodes, and this is where the fund decentralization conversation comes into play. How many of these nodes are subsidized by Stellar? How many of them are run by Stellar? It certainly looks maybe to a lesser degree than Ripple's nodes do, but you would have to individually check all of these. Does Back.Gold, do they receive funding from Stellar? Because this isn't proof of stake anymore, you kind of have to put up these nodes at the kindness and generosity of your own heart, unless you're subsidized by SDF, the Stellar Development Foundation. And ideally, these validators are geographically distributed by interests, That way one entity can't capture the network. And nobody cares about this stuff until it's a big deal, and then everybody cares about it. That's just how governance works. So this is just kind of a moot point for most people. They'll never look into this and they won't care, but I guarantee you it's going to be an issue on Ethereum one day. Mark my words, maybe not 2 years from now, maybe not 4 years from now, but 5 or 6 years from now. By that time, we'll definitely see some issue with ETH governance and proof of stake because all the coins are going to be sitting on exchanges. Most likely, at least the majority of them. If you look at transaction counts for Stellar, just popping off up here to 9 million plus now almost on a weekly average. Average transaction values declining slightly since the beginning of the year. So I tend to believe that this is more microtransaction related or smaller transactions. It's down to around 850 USD per transaction. So this is probably DEX related, and it's probably unfair to compare anything now to anything previously. Anytime a network adds a DEX or some new functionality, yes, it's bullish. Yes, it's different than before, but you also can't really compare anything to previously. It's good that the network can handle this, but I think it looks deceptively more bullish than it might be, considering what's going on under the hood. Active addresses as well in the fill here have increased quite substantially. NVT, inverse metric of economic utility relative to price, has fallen substantially. It's still around 280. If you look at NVT across all chains, Stellar historically has had the highest NVT. Now you can't really compare chain to chain, but it does tell you something about on-chain activity relative to market cap. You can also see here the previous proof of stake wallet distributions. At least I assume that's what that is. How it spiked up every week or so, and it's still spiked for quite some time after that. So I don't really know what that is, but it's clearly something that's an automated process or looks like an automated process. But if we average this out, active address is definitely rising and peaking significantly in recent days, almost hitting a new all-time high. But again, if this is all DEX related, is it bullish or is it just people using the network for the first time? That's a tough call, I think. If you look at MVRV relative to price, this is market cap versus on-chain cap or realized cap again. And for most coins, this should line up 1-to-1. The highs in price, the all-time highs in price, should line up with highs in MVRV. Much like NVT, Stellar's MVRV goes way past 2x, which is where most coins sort of top out. In 2017, it was 4.3. 2018, it was 10.5. Most recently, it got up to 4 and pulled back from there. So on backtesting, it looks like anything below 2 for Stellar is in the buy zone, is in the oversold zone, especially when it got below 1, below 0.5. Price still kept declining, but that is telling you that the realized cap is greater than the market cap. The on-chain activity is greater than the market cap at that point in time. So currently we're at 2.5, and in the future, if this does peak up in price, I would look for anything around 4 plus. That looks like the danger zone on MVRV. If you look at Google Trends for Stellar, obviously this is a real word used in the real world, and it has some baseline. But even with that, you can see this is probably crypto, and this is definitely crypto related in 2017, 2018. So currently we're just flatlining. And if price starts to perk up, you'll probably see this perk up as well. When price is consolidating, Google Trends is typically flat. This is more of a, are we overbought signal? Are we euphoric type signal? If price goes to new highs, new all-time highs, I'd look to this as well as MVRV and compare. Is everybody in yet, right? Because I always love to bring up the latest flavor of the week thing, and Shiba is a good example of that. You can see it actually peaked a couple times. You can see this is clearly crypto related because previously in previous years it wasn't as frothy as that. And I bet if you compare this to the price chart, it's almost 1-to-1 for a great indicator that, yeah, we're close to the top here. It's always worth checking that out. Another one that's been hot flavor of the week lately. Okay, no, you can't really see anything here because this again is a real word. But anyway, if you look at Grayscale Holdings, I always like to see where else are these coins at, and it is in a Grayscale trust. Currently 101% above spot price. This is because these coins are locked up for 6 months, 12 months, depending on what the prospectus or whatever says for the pink sheets. And in the past 30 days, people have been selling it, rightfully so. They're way above spot. So this will continue to come down and continue to likely go below spot over time as these coins get unvested in this trust. And you can see how that's worked out for ETC. It's now negative 46% below spot. So maybe it's time to just pack that one up and call it a day. If it gets below 50%, 60%, I mean, at what point do you say, all right, enough's enough? Flipping gears to technicals, this is Stellar on the 1 year MA in the green, the 5 times that MA in the red, and the midline in the white. And if I'm backtesting, this looks good for anything. I use it for forward testing for the future. And you can see the buy zones in the green, you can see the sell zones in the red, you can see we're currently in the buy zone. You can also see this thing just sort of lingers in the buy zone for years. So be careful here if you're like, oh, we're in the buy zone, it's time to buy now. Not quite that simple, but let's say this is the buy zone. Let's say this is more towards the bottom. Then the expectation would be at the very minimum a midline tap if we do go bullish. Now it's got like 28 days, in my opinion. All of crypto is 28 days to do something because I don't expect Q1 to be bullish. I think Q1 2021 was a rarity. I don't think that'll happen ever again. All right, I won't say ever, but I don't think it'll happen frequently for tax reasons, for all sorts of reasons. Q1 is not where the moves happen. It's usually Q2, Q4. So if this doesn't happen in Q4 for alts, this could happen in Q2, and this will curve down if we're bearish. So keep that in mind. But it's a good target if you're buying here. You can see how long this took, right? From high to high, it took 2018 to 2021 to eventually return to that. So this could be a long time before this thing moves out of this. Looking at the 5200 EMAs, VPVR, and RSI on Poloniex, tons of support down here. Previously it had a mega consolidation in 2018 that broke down along with everything else. Then it had more consolidation in 2019, more in 2020, and finally took off in 2021. So currently it's actually consolidating with an ascending triangle, at least that's how I'd call it. A few other charts look like this. ZRX of all things looks like this. Bancor kind of looks like this, BNT. MAs aren't really going to help you here because it's been sideways for quite some time, several months. So if you're bullish, you want to see this thing above 0.4. If you're bearish, you want to hope that it breaks diagonal support here, but it needs to bounce sooner rather than later to sustain the likelihood that this is an ascending triangle with a bullish bias. And if you look on the cloud, it is kind of in and out of the cloud, neutral, not quite bearish yet, but it's always interesting how the cloud will line up with chart patterns like this, because if it's below the diag here, it'll be below the cloud, and then it will be definitively bearish, telling you, yeah, don't expect higher highs anytime soon. If we map this out and measure it as an ascending triangle, we take the high, we take the low, we fib that out, and it gives you a target of 50 to 60 cents, basically. Not a mega move from here, but it is a decent, maybe 2x-ish from the current price. So it doesn't look too bad in general. Against BTC, it's just been a horror show since 2019. This is the 3-day 5200. You got your death cross, and it's just been nothing but down since then. It's consolidated for years and then broke down again. Currently, it is knocking on local lows. You can't see the scale here. It doesn't really matter, let's be honest. And there's plenty of support on the downside. I don't think this thing's going to spike to all-time lows anytime soon, but clearly not a winner against BTC, and definitely not a winner against ETH. This has a better chance of knocking on all-time lows. And if anything, I mean, this was a crazy W in 2017. You did have a bull div on these lows, technically, maybe technically not, but let's call it a bull div. Here, you're kind of seeing this like multi-year bull div play out. RSI refuses to go lower, make lower lows as price just continues to drift. Lower, lower, lower. It's out at sea, just mindless, moving around, bobbing and weaving, decaying in the sun. I mean, that's what it looks like. So clearly not a winning trade here to be on the long side of this. It's basically bids at all-time lows. I mean, that's, if you want to play this, that's how I would play it. So I'd wait for the USD consolidation, and against BTC and ETH, you're probably losing money. Lastly, let me just mention the ETH BTC fund and DeFi portfolio. I trade for Techme Capital, Enzyme.finance, a non-custodial portfolio management tool where you can send ETH or USDC or just watch what I'm doing. You can see everything, including AUM, performance, allocation, vaults I'm in here on Yearn, Comp, and Aave, as well as the trades in the trades tab down below. That's all I have for this one. Like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, and happy trading.